Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Chris, if you don't know. We're going to do something a little different today because I know some people don't always like the Mr. Ballin videos, so I've decided to switch it up. I'm thinking of you, Faye. So I decided to switch it up and started doing some other ones. I'm trying to catch up with some of the reactions. I still have one more to do. I just got done with the most effed up interrogation, and yeah, that one was crazy. This is a little different. This is from Rob Gavagan. It is 5 disturbing true cell phone incidents. Seriously Strange, number 64. I subscribe to the channel. I've seen a few of his videos, but he doesn't post as much as he used to, I think, because of the YouTube algorithm change. But I also want to take this time out to thank everyone who was out earlier for the YouTube pancake social at the local park. It was 17 million of you. It was great. We had a water balloon fight that was filled with cactus needles. It was different. So thought I heard a noise, or it was a ghost. Either way, that's fine. So we're gonna go ahead and get into this one. This is just a random video. It's under 15 minutes. So I have a couple more videos that I'm going to be doing today, and then I'll release them throughout the week. It's Sunday, March 13th. It's just after 2 p.m. So I have a few more videos that I'm going to do, and then I'll be able to start kind of banking some more. And if you have any videos that you want, throw them down in the comment section. Find me on Twitter. I throw little stupid comments in the descriptions. So you can go ahead and read those if you like, or don't. You know, it's up to you. Without further ado, let's get into this and let's see what kind of disturbing true cell phone incidents there were.
Warning, this episode contains content that may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion.
All right, well then we're not going to watch it. All right, well thanks for watching. Have a good day. All right.
Discretion is advised. Cell phones. We rely on them for almost everything nowadays. They are our news source, our direct line to family and friends, our entertainment. But technology often has a way of turning against us.
I dropped my phone.
A ringing phone lost in a wreckage, a missing teenager, and an impossible stalker. All on this week's episode of Seriously Strange. When we lose the ones we love, we may instinctively pick up the phone to call them, but it's not exactly supposed to be the other way around. Charles E. Peck sat among 224 other passengers on his train, traveling out of Los Angeles. It was a little after 4 p.m. and he just had a job interview for a position at the Van Nuys Airport, a job that would mean he could finally marry his fiancée, Andrea Katz. Things seemed to be looking up for the father of 3. Life was moving forward, but perhaps a little too quickly. It was September 12th, 2008, and unfortunately it would be Charles's last day. Charles's Metrolink train ignored the red signal ahead of a single-lane track where a freight train was coming from the opposite direction. Neither locomotive had time to stop, and the trains met head-on in a collision at a total speed of 83 miles per hour. The crash left behind a tangled mess of metal, tracks, engines, and the passengers that had been on board. Meanwhile, Andrea Katz was on her way to pick up her fiancé at the train station when breaking news of the crash was broadcast from her car radio. Frantic, she contacted Charles' family, and they all met at the station, waiting anxiously for any signs of their loved one. Prospects were heavy, though, as emergency responders counted over 100 injured to that point, with a rising death count. But Charles' loved ones held on to a pulsating hope when they started receiving incoming calls from Charles on their cell phones. They answered to the sound of static, frantically dialing him back only to be met with his pre-recorded voicemail. But even though he wasn't answering, he kept ringing. Call after call came in to his brother, his sister, his son, stepmother, and fiancé, totaling 35 calls. 11 hours after the crash, the calls suddenly stopped, and Charles still hadn't been found. But first responders continued searching, using the signals from the phone calls to trace his location. Then, an hour later, emergency workers finally found Charles, deceased. After examining his body, they concluded there was nothing they could have done, as Charles had died upon impact. The phone that dialed his loved ones for 11 hours after Charles passing away was never found amongst the wreckage, and no explanation for the calls could ever be determined. In a terrible twist of irony, investigators believe the train's engineer was texting instead of paying attention to the tracks, and that it was the cause of the collision.
Don't text and drive, or text and drive a plane, or text and drive a plane, fly a plane, do a train, or an automobile. Don't text planes, trains, or automobiles. Wow, that's calling 31 times, and he died instantly. That's crazy.
When you set the table for 3, but a 4th shows up unexpectedly. An internet user only known by the name of Mariano posted online, shaken by an experience he'd had with a cell phone on the 4th of November, 2014. He'd been sitting at the dining room table with his girlfriend and her mother, enjoying a normal evening, when all of a sudden, a bright flash illuminated the room, followed by a click, and then another, and another. A cell phone resting on the table was taking picture after picture, all on its own. The phone belonged to Mariano's girlfriend's mother, and once the flashes stopped, the true terror began. The three looked at one another.
Was the phone hacked?
From across the table in silence, bewildered and a little unnerved by what had just happened. Surely it had just been a malfunction. The mother picked up the phone and rifled through the photo library to see what the camera had captured, and at first it seemed as though it was a technological glitch. Each picture was blank, that is, until she reached the last one. Beyond the camera's flash at the bottom, she could see the vague outline of something, but what it was, she wasn't sure. Mariano took the picture, and after adjusting the exposure and brightness, was met with an eerie image, a figure with sunken eyes and a snarling mouth. After, he sketched what he saw to give internet users a vague idea of what he sees when he
I don't see that face at all.
looks at the photo of the uninvited, unseen guest. Mariano has not made any updates or posts since.
Yeah, I didn't see that. It's creepy, but I didn't see that face.
You never know which phone call will be your last. May 13th, 2008, the last day of finals, meant freedom for 19-year-old student Brandon Swanson. He celebrated his success.
I just did, so I know the name of this, and I just did a video earlier about Brandon Lawson, and I was thinking Brandon Swanson when I did that video. So I kind of know a little bit about this case. It's still a creepy case. If you don't know, it's eerie.
Successful survival of his first year at community college with friends, laughing and looking forward to the summer ahead. However, summer was about to get off to a rocky start. Around midnight, Brandon phoned his parents to tell them he'd crashed his car into a ditch and needed a ride home. While stranded, Brandon was certain of his location just outside of Lind, Minnesota, and directed his parents to his location. But when Brian and Annette Swanson arrived, there was only darkness, and their son was nowhere to be seen. Confused and growing worried as the night grew deeper, they called his cell phone thinking he must just be down the road, but Brandon saw no sign of them either. At this point, he told his parents to meet him in the parking lot of a local nightclub instead, and he stayed on the phone with his father for 44 minutes as he walked to his destination, seeming calm, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he shouted an expletive just before the line went dead.
I think he said, "Oh shit," for those who don't know the case. And if you don't know the case, you should look it up. There are podcasts on it. I'm sure there are videos on YouTube about it. YouTube, not YouTubes, about it. But yeah, it's It's pretty crazy. I just listened to a podcast about it.
Brian's blood ran cold as he dialed his son's phone over and over with no response. Friends, family, and authorities searched all night. Police found his car trapped in a ditch but located 25 miles outside of Lind, and his cell phone calls were triangulated 20 miles away from the small town, meaning Brandon was more lost than he originally thought. Scent dogs led authorities to the edge of the Yellow Medicine River, which was flooded the night Brandon disappeared, but thorough searches of every major and minor waterway in the area turned up nothing. Still, Brian and Annette Swanson called their son's phone over and over for days, and it continued to ring, meaning if Brandon had taken a plunge, he'd dropped the phone somewhere beforehand. Even with no sign of Brandon, the search continued for days, months, and then years. And to this day, neither Brandon nor any of his belongings, including his cell phone, have been found, as if he had vanished into thin air.
Yeah, that one's a creepy one.
Technology makes staying connected with friends and family easier than ever, even from beyond the grave. Frank Jones of Lancashire, England, was no stranger to eerie phenomenon. In 1988, he'd bought and moved into a home in the small community of Blackpool with his wife and children, but things were far from normal right from the start. The previous owners gave the Joneses an ominous warning of the house's sinister activity, which Frank brushed off at first. But then the Joneses began to experience it for themselves. Water spigots turned on full blast on their own. The children had the sheets pulled off of them in the middle of the night. A putrid smell and a heavy feeling pervaded the air, and doors would slam without any force behind them. Frank's daughter Maureen recalled being home alone and enduring a terrifying hailstorm of noise. Footsteps thundering up the stairs, drawers and cupboards being thrown open and rifled through. Frank himself felt paralyzed in the presence of this malevolent force, an entity they nicknamed the Thing. The Joneses did what any sane family would have done at this point. They called in an exorcist. The Fleetwood Spiritualist Church arrived at the Jones residence and immediately felt the presence of an invisible spirit trapped between two worlds. The church cleansed the property, and Frank thought that would be the end of it, and for 15 years it was. In 2003, Frank lost his son Stephen to a brain tumor, and then his wife Sadie just 3 months later to a heart attack. Sadie, up until her dying day, kept her cell phone close, finding comfort in the modern convenience, always just a phone call away from her children and her husband, no matter where she went. She was buried with the cell phone in her coffin. After returning home from Sadie's funeral, Frank noticed he had a missed call on his cell phone from the home phone. It didn't make sense. Everyone had been at the funeral during the time of the call. The house had been empty. Grief-ridden, Frank shrugged it off as a mistake until he began to notice the familiar scent of his late wife's perfume and the smell of freshly lit cigarettes that she used to smoke. Then came the messages. The family began to receive texts that sounded like they'd come from Sadie, but there was no phone number attached to the messages, a seemingly impossible glitch. Frank and his family members maintain to this day that it's Sadie's way of staying in touch, because the alternative, that the Thing has awoken once more and is tormenting them, is a much less comforting conclusion, and they like to think Sadie is still close by.
That's weird.
Imagine the device in your hand being turned against you into a weapon used to stalk, harass, and terrorize you. In 2007, 16-year-old Courtney Kirkland's phone used to be an escape, a private place to chat with friends through text, to surf her social media sites in her own little corner of the internet. But it slowly became a source of constant dread, even when turned off. It began with the texts. Courtney's friends were receiving messages from her phone, but Courtney wasn't sending them. Then her family members began receiving multiple disturbing phone calls from a raspy male voice, making threats: "We hate you, we're going to cut your pets' throats, you're going to die, and we're going to murder you and your children." At first, it seemed like the anonymous calls were the work of a prankster. Anyone
That's just someone who's just being rude.
can call and make a threat, but then things got a little too personal. Seemingly empty threats to
I'm gonna cut your pet's throat isn't personal. Like, if somebody said that to me, that's personal. If I find that who that person is, I'm going to show up at their house, I'm going to knock on their door, and I'm going to say, that was inappropriate. And I'm going to walk away. Teach them a lesson.
Distorted into, I know where you are, I know where you live, and the harasser unfortunately truly seemed to know every move the Kirkendalls made. He could tell the family members what clothing they were wearing, what they were doing, and when the children departed for school, as well as where they attended school. The family listened to their voicemails only to hear their private conversations being played back at them. Conversations they'd had in the comfort of their own home. Feeling unsafe, they installed a security system at the house. Not long after, their stalker called and recited the passcode to disarm it.
Oh, hell no. You should have got the cops involved by now.
Finally, the Kirkendalls contacted the police. A look at the cell phone records sent a collective chill through the family. The harassing calls were being made from their own phones, with a majority of them coming from Courtney's. The only problem with that was the calls were made while the phones were turned off. That's when they began to notice their phones would turn on by themselves after being shut off, and their ringtones had been changed. But it wasn't just the Kirkendalls who were terrorized. Courtney's aunt, Darcy Price, and the neighbor, Andrea McKay, became targets as well. Andrea, while cutting limes in her kitchen one day, picked up the ringing phone to a voice that simply said, "I prefer lemons." The three families...
Oh, hell no. You're cutting limes and someone's, "I prefer lemons." You had to have your houses bugged. I mean, cameras everywhere.
Lived their every waking moment in fear, and authorities were just as disturbed by the activity. The Kirkendalls spoke with a detective and afterward received a call playing back their conversation, a warning that their stalker wasn't afraid of law enforcement. At the time, cell phone providers said they weren't aware of any technology that would allow such activity that the family had experienced. Fircrest Police Chief John Cheeseman, a longtime friend of the family, said he was dumbfounded and that his department had never seen anything like this before. Even after switching numbers and providers 2 times, the calls continued, pushing the constant weight of anxiety into the Kirkendalls' everyday lives. Even with high-tech equipment meant to unweave the twisted hacker's web, police only ever found dead ends. The Kirkendalls treasure the days when their phones don't ring. Before we go, I'd like to give a very special shout out to...
Are they still being harassed? Sorry, I'm going to look it up. Are the Kirkendalls still being harassed? Cell phone stalkers harass Washington family. They're in a horror movie. Heather Kirkendall, one of the alleged victims, they said, "You're going to die." Police say they are stumped, but they have not ruled out the possibility the alleged victims are making the whole thing up. Wow. Sorry, I'm scrolling through looking for anything that the police department tried to find the culprits. The calls were traced back to the Kirkendalls' own phones, even when they were turned off. It got worse. The Kirkendalls and 2 other Firecrest families told ABC News that they believe the callers are using their cell phones to spy on them. They say the hackers know their every move, where they are, what they're doing, and what they're wearing. They've recorded private conversations, the family said, including a meeting with a local detective. Many of the voicemails sound like a teenager's prank. Sometimes they say real juvenile things. Sometimes it's really scary. it's kind of scary. It's probably when you decide you don't want any of this whole technology thing. Just go back to a rotary phone. Get a rotary phone for a cell phone that does not have cameras, doesn't have anything, and just make sure you have a really long cord to plug in. So it wouldn't really be a cell phone, it'd be a landline, but you just have to keep connecting plugs to it. And battery operated, so like a cordless phone, but battery operated. And yeah, it's a cordless rotary phone landline. A landline cordless rotary. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Well, anyways, this was different. So if you like the video, I'll definitely check out more of Rob Gavagan. And if not, then I'll just check them out on my own time. Because, whatever. Sorry, I thought I had food on my face. Sorry. Just some gray. But anyways, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment in there and tell me if you like these or there's other videos that he does that you want to check out. I have a couple more that I'm going to be checking out today, so I appreciate it, and I do appreciate all the comments, all the subscribers, and support the comments. I'm trying to do something good, and I appreciate sincerely the comments, and let's just see what happens with this thing. All right, so have a good day, have a good night, just be good, and don't call people and do any of this stuff.